Supporting applications. In this nugget, we'll be taking a look at supporting applications. First of all, we'll take a look at deploying applications themselves using Windows installer technology, which has been around for a few years, but it's a really good method for packaging applications and their configuration together to make a more clean install and subsequently a cleaner uninstall. Then we'll also take a look here at the MSI exec, which is the MSI executive useful for managing this MSI installations. We'll also take a look at group policy objects and how we can install applications using a GPO, as well as kind of desktop apps, quote unquote. And I mean that because they're literally desktop apps. There's things you see on the desktop, and we'll take a look at how to configure those as well. Well, I gotta tell you, folks, I've been having a whole bunch of fun lately as a photographer. I got invited to shoot some NCAA games, and here's ASU versus UCLA. I was right on the baseline with Sports Illustrated photographers and other really good photographers, and it was a whole bunch of fun. Well, one thing that happened, though, during this game, and by the way, ASU got crushed. But anyway, during the halftime break, I went back to the media room to talk to some other photographers, and one of the photographers came rushing into the room and said, "James, you gotta go take a picture with me real quick." So we ran out into the hallway, and he says, "Take a picture of me and Shaq." "You and who?" "Me and Shaq." Yes, sure enough, out in the hallway was Shaquille O'Neal. So I took a picture of him. And the other photographer took a picture of me with Shaq, and what a keepsake that is. By the way, if you don't know which one I am, maybe you've never seen my picture before, I am the person here on the right, and Shaquille O'Neal is the one over here on the left. Just in case it's easy to confuse us, because I know there's quite a resemblance and everything. It was kind of embarrassing, because I'm already short enough as it is. I mean, I'm like 5'9", and that's in stilettos, and he's, I don't know, over 7 feet tall. And he's kind of slouched over, too. If he's standing up straight, I'm like up to his middle of his bicep here, so really embarrassing. Now, I don't know who he was there to cheer on, because he used to play for the Lakers, so I thought maybe he was cheering UCLA, but then now he plays for a team in Arizona, so I thought maybe he's cheering on ASU. But hey, either way, I was not about to argue with him one way or the other. I mean, after all, I wouldn't want to have to teach him a lesson or embarrass him or anything like that. Now, as we get started talking about installations, there's a key component in current Windows operating systems that really helps to make things better. And that's something called Windows installer technology. This is something that application developers try to comply with using Microsoft Software Development Kit, or the SDK, when they write their programs and their installation routines. And this helps it to be more consistent and easier to troubleshoot if there's ever a problem. Now, what this does, Windows Installer Technology does, is it packages the files and the settings in an MSI file. And this MSI file will make things go much more smoothly. Now, you might think to yourself, well, I don't seem to be using many MSI files. Well, in reality, you might be, because a lot of setup.exe files actually extract MSI files, which the setup routine then references and launches in the installation there. So MSI is a big part of things, whether you see them or not. Now, also, an advantage of Windows Installer Technology is it gives us pretty reliable, let me get rid of this little prompt there, gives us pretty reliable installation as well as uninstallation, or uninstalls. And this is a big issue because a lot of what's taken place in the past, in previous previous versions of Windows and so forth, is that you might have an application that you think is causing a problem, so you want to install it, at least you think you do, but it might leave behind remnants in the registry or the file system, or it might have stomped on top of other critical Windows system files. Well, you're probably not going to see that happen much, if at all, unless it's just been poorly written, with MSI packaged Windows installer types of applications. So now your uninstalls will usually be much cleaner. I do still see some vendors that do not clean up very well in the sense of the shortcuts. They might still leave the shortcut on your desktop. But what it should happen is, if they comply with the SDK and Windows Installer Technology, it should remove the most important things, such as the files themselves, as well as things like registry settings. Now, one thing that is allowed, and you may see this sometimes when you do an uninstall, is it might say, do you want to keep the log files or the user configuration settings or other things like this? In fact, this sometimes happens when I uninstall Photoshop from a computer, because there's a lot of customization you can do with Photoshop. Well, I might just want to reinstall it. Maybe I just have a corrupt installation and I want to reinstall it. If I answer the prompt that I want it to keep those settings, then when I reinstall Photoshop, I haven't lost them all. Now, What about Windows Installer's deployment? You can deploy a Windows Installer application just using manual methods, and this is what you'll do when you double-click on the MSI or the setup.exe, which expands an MSI, and it just next finish through a wizard, and there you go. By the way, that's another key item that's just a characteristic of Windows Installer technologies and current methods, is that normally it's going to use some kind of a wizard. Also, you could script it. You can run MSI exec, and this appears on all Windows operating systems now, and you just type from a command line or from a script MSI exec space, and then you have some parameters that you can apply with that as well. We'll see those coming up shortly here. And then, to me, one of the biggest parts of this is you can also deploy it with a group policy object. Now, you can also deploy using SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager, or SMS, but that's a little bit beyond our scope. But in our scope, we could use a GPO, and it really works pretty well. And now then, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these MSI exec parameters, and then I'll show you an example from the command line here shortly. First of all, you could type MSI exec /package, and what that does is it installs. Now, most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I really at least leave this one in here as an explanation, because you would think that they would just have /install instead of /package. Why this one is more obscure than the rest of these, I don't know, but that's just a Microsoft thing, I guess. But that's what it does. It does install. You have to also point it to the proper MSI, and I'll show you that shortly here. And then you can also do an uninstall. So if you've previously installed that application and now you want to uninstall it, now that's just exactly what it does. And the rest of these are explanatory as well, but briefly, this simply says no restart, meaning that, especially if you're going to script this, you might not want the user's computer to suddenly restart without the user understanding why or something. So you might just wait for the user to do their normal restart, for example, before the application might work properly. That's also a troubleshooting issue, because if you deployed with the script and the application requires a restart, but the user never restarted, that's probably why the app's not working. Now, this is much more of an issue now with laptop users that just kind of close the lid when they're done, and they rarely really shut down anymore. We don't really see that happen as much as it used to. Now, the other thing you could do if you wanted to add in a safety measure there is you could do a /prompt restart, and what that would do is it would prompt the user to restart the computer. That way, at least they have a clue that once the application's installed, that's exactly what they have to do. And then you could force a restart, which would do just that as well. And that might be the case once again if you have users that never really shut down or restart their computers, and you need to make sure that it's restarted so that you can mitigate future troubleshooting issues and help desk support calls. Now then, here's an example. I've simply gone to a command prompt, and if I wanted to script this, probably a batch file would be just as easy as anything. And what I would do is I would type exactly this in Notepad and then save the file with a .bat extension. Then I'd use group policy to include that as a startup or a logon script. Now, once I've typed this in, though, and I can do this from a command line manually here if I want to as well, although usually it's just easier just to double-click on the MSI. Now, once I press Enter here, we see that it's going to go through the installation, and this is just Microsoft has some kind of a super calculator that you can download from them, and you can just search on this if you want to, Microsoft Calculator Plus. Now, this does require user interaction, so it's not able to fully automate here, because we have to agree to the license agreement and other things. For other products, such as Microsoft Office, you can come up with scripts that will automate all of this for you. Or better yet, you can use the Office 2007 or Office 2003, for example, resource kits to come up with an answer file for you or a whole set of answers so that this can be fully automated and the user doesn't see any interface here at all. Now, if I didn't want the user to see an interface, by the way, I could trail this with a /quiet. The disadvantage to that is it would cause this installation to fail because it would have no way of getting interaction from me right here. So I'll just continue on here and I'll allow this to install itself. And then in a moment here, I'm just going to kind of repeat this, except that we're going to uninstall it. So I'll just type in uninstall when it's done here in just a moment, and after I've shown the product to you, and then we'll go ahead and do that as well. Now, it does require user account control permission. This is an issue with this kind of a thing sometimes. I'm going to go ahead and click continue here. But once again, with things such as Office, or something that you deploy using a group policy object, it allows tacit permission for all users to install the software if it's been assigned from on high using group policy objects. And if that's the case, you should not get a UAC prompt that you see right there. So here we see that once I've done that, now I have Microsoft Calculator Plus. By the way, here's a quick thing I'll just show you real quick here. Notice how after I installed it, it immediately went to that location at the bottom of the Start menu, rather than forcing me to start from here and scroll down around until I could find it. Anytime you install something new, it automatically puts it real close to the start orb so you can access it more easily, and it puts it in an offset color to identify it as a new application. And you can see here that it does, a lot of different things. I don't really even know all of the things that this thing does. I usually look at it in the scientific view because it makes me look smarter. Heck, I don't even know what all these things are here. But anyway, it makes me look really smart. So there it is. Now I've got that installed. Now I get tired of it or something. And I say, I want to uninstall it. Or maybe I got too many people asking questions about what all those fancy buttons do. And I am embarrassing myself because I can't answer the questions. Well, then I'll just uninstall it using the same command line you saw me just type in just there. And I'm going to have to allow that. And then you see it right there as well. All right, now let me go ahead and show you a tip. It's not an exam objective, but something that might come in handy for you. Remember earlier I mentioned that a lot of applications really are nothing more than setup.exe that contain MSI files. Well, if I open up a command prompt and take a look at this WinZip file on my desktop, I'll just change to my user profile. And then I'll do a dir, and I think I've got a desktop. There it is. Change directory to my desktop. Then I do a dir here. We'll see that it's actually winzip111.exe. Now, the reason why you don't see it .exe, as I'm sure you're probably well aware, is that we have not turned on the appropriate options. I'm going to change that from this point forward by going to Tools and Folder Options from within Windows Explorer, and then going to View. I'm going to no longer hide those extensions. I'm also going to make some other changes here. I'm going to no longer hide protected operating system files to make things easier to find for myself as well as we work with this. Now, we can see the extension on this. Now, here's the point of what I'm trying to make with this, is if I double-click on this, you'll see that it starts to launch an installation, and I'll just kind of just next through it. I'm not going to really do a whole lot of elaborate things here. I'm just going to just make it as easy as I can here, and I'm just going to continue on through. Now, once I get to a certain point, I can agree to the license agreement, and now what's going to happen here is all of the actual files that are included in WinZip have been extracted somewhere else on the hard drive. So what I'm going to do is go back to my own profiles location, my temporary file location, and that's under users, and then whoever the current user is, Trainer Nugget Lab, and then I'm going to go to my app data, local, and then here I'm going to find that I've got a temp directory here. And within this, I should be able to find the WinZip temp directory. Now, this is not really a little obscure. It's a little difficult to find, but I just happen to know that that's what it was. Otherwise, you'd have to dig around for a little bit. But look here. There's WinZip32.msi. That's actually the packager necessary to install this. Now, WinZip has something called a self-extracting WinZip. And that's exactly what they did. They used their own product to package up all of these files into that for us. So if I wanted to really use this and use the MSI file that's located inside of the setup.exe, I would just copy all these files. I wouldn't actually need the top two because that's a kind of a third-party add-on. But and for my sake, I'll just copy those all, and I've already done that at some point in the past. And then I just pasted them into another location here. I just called it WinZip binaries right here. This is on a network drive, which is important when you deploy applications using a group policy object. And we'll take a look at that as well shortly here. But now that I've got this MSI file out here, I can now manipulate it and work with it as necessary, and it's available for me to install. I don't really need any of this anymore, especially if I'm going to use a group policy object, so I'm just going to click Cancel and exit Setup and get out of here. Alright, now that I've got the WinZip files extracted, I'm ready to go ahead and deploy WinZip using any number of different methods. But the two I'll show you here are to use a group policy object, and you can do it to a computer or to a user. Now, when I deploy software, I'll do it this way. Let's go here to my Windows Server 2008 server, where I've got the group policy object console open. So once I've got this GPMC open, I've created a policy. Where is it? Install WinZip right here, and I dragged it up here to Phoenix users. Now, we worked with policies quite a lot in a previous video, so I won't elaborate too much on what's going on here. But notice, of course, since it's linked to an organizational unit that, as you would assume, contains user accounts, I can only edit the user configuration settings and have them be effective. If I edit the computer configuration settings, then they will have no effect on my Phoenix users. Okay, so I could do this, however. I could take the policy and link it to my Phoenix computers if I wanted to. And if that were the case, I would then edit the computer configuration. Now let's right click here to choose edit so you can see what I'm talking about. Here, if I wanted to link it to a computer's OU, I would simply go to policies, software settings, software installation, and I would create a policy here. In this case, since I linked it to the users, Phoenix users, I'm going to go down here where software installation appears, and I'll right click to choose a new package. Now when you see new package here, it's very important that you go to a network location. I may have extracted the files locally or something like that, and so the tendency would be to go to a local drive to point this here. However, you don't want to do that. You always want to send it to a UNC share path, because the destination clients that try to install the software will look for the literal path that you put in here. So if I extracted the files to my D drive, it'll look for it on their own D drive, which, who knows, that could be a CD-ROM or something. So what I'll need to do here is I'll just enter a UNC path, whack whack DC1, which is a server in another location that I've got, and I've extracted the source files there, and we'll see it there. And once we do this, we'll see that under applications, I've got something, utilities here, and I've got, I think somewhere in here, there it is, WinZip binaries, and there's my WinZip that I extracted using the method I showed you just a few moments ago. Now I just double click on that thing, and I can choose one of these three methods. Let's talk about what these are. Published means that I don't really install the software. What I do is I make it available to the users to install themselves so that when they go to, let me find a better example here, when they go to their desktop and choose Control Panel and go to Add Remove Programs, what they could do here, and if they're in Vista, of course, they'll just go to Programs here, and then what they can do is to go ahead and choose this last option, install a program from the network. And once they've clicked on that, if I've published the software to a user, then the software appears here and it would say WinZip, and I would just click on it and next, finish. You cannot publish software to a computer because it requires an interaction for you to be able to select the software and then click next, finish, and all that stuff. It requires human interaction. So when I install software on the computer configuration side, published is grayed out, and I can only assign the software. And then I can also choose advanced if there were additional items that I wanted to do, such as to apply a modification. For example, with Office, you can create MST files, which are transform files, which further customize the way that the installation takes place. But for our purposes, we can go ahead and choose Assigned here, and I'll click OK. Now, once I've got this appearing here, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of other quick items. Now, a lot of this is outside of our scope, but here's the basics at least. Once we double-click on it, notice that we can go to the Deployment tab, and I could switch this back to Published if I wanted to, but we don't normally need to do that. Assigned is probably how most applications are deployed. Now, once I've got this, the other important thing to notice here is a few different checkboxes through here. I could auto-install this application by file extension activation. That's locked on. You can see it's grayed on right here. This simply means that if I double-click on a file that ends in .zip, it'll automatically launch the application. Okay, normally we see that with an option like Published. Then I could tick that on or off as necessary, and then uninstall this application when it falls out of the scope of management. If I take my user account here, for example, that's linked to the OU that's inside of this OU that this GPO belongs to, then if they move to a different department and they're in a different OU now, it will automatically uninstall this software when that user moves out. It's kind of handy for licensing issues where you might have burned a license and given it to somebody who's no longer in your department and who no longer needs the software. You can also select to not display the program in Add Remove Programs. This will help to prevent users from inadvertently uninstalling it if they don't know what it is. Say, hey, I don't know what that is, so I think I'll just uninstall it. And you can also choose to install this application at logon. Now, it will install at logon, so this thing is kind of misleading. What this really does is it installs the entirety of the application at logon, and that's very useful for some suite applications, and that's suite S-U-I-T-E, not S-W-E-E-T. Anyway, for installing suite applications that have multiple packages involved with them so that users don't get orphaned if they have a laptop and we don't want to see them on an airplane with only part of the application installed. By selecting this when they're 30,000 feet in the air, they'll get all of the suite of the application, including, Outlook, Access, Excel, whatever it is that they have. Now, here also, by default, this actually installed at maximum. I went in here a little bit earlier while I was offline, behind your back while you weren't looking, and I switched this over to basic. Now, when it chooses maximum, this is an interface option item. And if we have an application that does not interoperate well with presenting an interface to the user, then you don't want this at maximum. In fact, I happen to know from experience that WinZip won't install properly using the maximum setting here. So you can choose basic instead. And really, that's what we do with most applications, and it really works pretty well if we choose only the basic option. Now here I've gone to a remote desktop connection where I'm going to connect to Vista Client 01 as one of my generic users, Phoenix User 01. And once we have connected to that account, we should see that in just moments we will have WinZip installed for this user's account. And I paused recording for just a moment here so we wouldn't have to wait for an hourglass very long, but you can see that we have a WinZip icon on the desktop, and we do also have, I think, there it is, WinZip on the start menu here as well. If I click it, we see that I didn't pay for this. This is actually just the trial version, but of course you could do this in a corporation if you had a fully licensed version. So anyway, there it goes. Now WinZip appears to be working now, and I could just continue to use the evaluation version and do whatever it is that we need to do. So that's how software deployment works when I deploy it to a user. Alright, now let's switch gears entirely and talk about something else now that I call dual view, and I've known that people at Microsoft that have also called it that. But what they really call it, I guess in the official sense, is just multiple monitors. So we need to know how to configure multiple monitors. And this is how we would do that. You'd right-click on the desktop and choose Properties. Once you've done that, you could go to the display settings. That would open up the dialog box that you see before us. Now, in my video card where I took this screenshot, I have two video cards, and I'm using something called SLI, and this is just the ability to bridge two video cards together to get aggregate performance out of both those cards. But anyway, this is how it might look initially, because I have 4 ports total for video on the back of my computer. Most people will probably have only 1 or 2. So this is a little bit unusual in that respect. Now, if I had decided that I wanted to use both this monitor and connect it to the other video out on the back of my computer, I could do that. All I would have to do is to select the second option, and that's what this looks like. Just select that particular screen, and then check the box that says extend the desktop onto this monitor. And then what would happen on a desktop computer is that it will give me basically just one giant screen. So I would have all of this space as one kind of a widescreen angle that I could use. And I might have Word open on this screen and Outlook on this screen. And in fact, that's how I actually work over on this computer that I took the screenshot from here. I have Word open on one and other stuff open on the other, and it gives me a lot more desktop real estate, and it's really pretty reasonable in terms of the expense of it as well. Now, if you have a laptop computer and you're connecting an external projector, for example, or it could be a TV screen or even just a normal monitor, then very often what will happen there is you can choose to mirror the display so that the exact same thing appears on monitor 1. That's normally going to be your laptop screen that flips up. The exact same thing appears there as does on the external TV or projector or monitor over here on number 2. And the advantage of that is I can face the audience while giving a PowerPoint presentation, for example, while behind me the projector is projecting onto a screen, and I can have confidence that I'm looking at the exact same thing that the audience is looking at. Although, as a quick side note, with current versions of PowerPoint, you can use a presenter view where it will show you one view of the presenter's notes on one screen while showing the actual slideshow on the other one. And that way, with the presenter's view, you can see what slides are in the deck, which slide is coming up next, and so forth. And it might be a little bit easier for some people to work the PowerPoint presentations that way. And this usually works pretty well. I've been using this for years. So I guess ever since, well, XP came out, I think, is when I started using this. If you get these confused sometimes, because sometimes it might look like on your left you want to see Microsoft Word, and yet it appears over on the right, and on the right you want to see Microsoft Outlook, but it appears on the left, then you can click and drag these around, and you can switch the order that way, or you can select which one is the main monitor, and that's the one that will by default then take the taskbar and start menu as well. Although, of course, you can move that around as well if you want to. But if you ever get these confused and you want to see if they're reversed or something, click Identify Monitors, and a big number, just like you see here on this illustration, appears right on the screen for the user to identify. Now, as far as troubleshooting dual display or dual view, I really have not run into an awful lot of problems with that. Actually, my wife, who's a public speaker, she's run into it more than I have, and I've had to kind of talk her through it over the phone from time to time while she's in another city. But one thing that you'll sometimes run into is that if you're using a laptop and you plug it into a projector, that the laptop will never see the projector here. Either it doesn't appear at all, or it's grayed out and it does not allow you to extend on it. You try to click it, it just won't let you. Sometimes that'll happen if, when you turned on the computer and powered it up, the projector was not plugged into your computer and it was turned off. Because if some laptops, if they don't see anything on that video out port, which is normally just a standard VGA out, then it will not kind of activate that port, and it will just ignore it for the rest of the session. So what you might have to do is to shut down the computer, turn on the projector, plug in the VGA cable into your VGA out on the laptop. Now everything's in place. Now turn on the laptop, and you should be able to see the projector from that point forward. The same kind of thing sometimes applies to SVGA. If your laptop has an SVGA out, then again also the television or whatever it's trying to plug into there, make sure that it's also on when you turn on the computer. So I guess I got ahead of myself a little bit here, but really what I'm talking about here is desktop applications, and I just use desktop loosely. They're just things that come with Windows or capabilities that appear with Windows that Microsoft considers applications in a certain sense, and that possibly could be covered by the exam objectives. I really wanted to cover these in other places, but they're really small topics, and so they didn't really have a good place to fit in elsewhere, so that's why I'm covering them here. And then the other thing we could talk about here is Windows Sidebar. This is actually pretty cool, and I don't use it in the videos because it kind of clutters up the screen for our current purposes, but if I wanted to use Windows Side View, what I could do is to click on the Start Orb and All Programs, Accessories, and then I could go to here to Windows Sidebar. Now I've disabled mine, but normally this will be something that does appear by default. And so here we have it. Now once we get this going, you can put a number of different things on here. This is a widget, or a gadget is what they're actually called by Microsoft, but it's a gadget that I downloaded from Microsoft. This is one of my favorite ones. It tells me how much RAM is currently in use, how much CPU utilization is going on, how much total memory I've got on this computer. I've got 2 gigabytes, for example, and it shows me that I have 2 64-bit processors. So it's kind of cool that way. I mean, this is one that I downloaded. Now, how do I get these, by the way? And how do I add additional stuff on here or get rid of it if I want to? Well, this is pretty intuitive, but just quickly here, even on this slideshow here, for example, of all these pictures, notice you can pause it and then just look at one picture. I can advance to the next one. I can view it if I want to, and it'll open it up from its file location in my computer, and then I can get a better look at this. So, a number of different things I can do there. This could vary between one gadget and the next, and then I could also just remove it by clicking on the X. I can also configure it by clicking on the little monkey wrench or whatever that thing is that you see there, and it gives you a number of different self-explanatory options there. And then I could also grab it by this kind of, I don't know what you call that really, but the grippy stuff. And I can just click and drag that out, and then of course it changes the view of it and so forth as necessary. So, a number of different things that we can do with that item. And if I want to get some additional items, I simply click on the plus up here at the top, and then this will point me to certain other things. So I could take a look at the clock there, I could look at the calendar, and I could just drag it over here, and now I've got a calendar on there. It's really just that easy, so it's pretty handy to have that way. And if I want to go to the next page and see some other gadgets that are available to me, I can certainly do that here as well. And then I can also choose to get more gadgets online, and there's a number of different ones that are being developed by a number of different companies or individuals that you can download, and they might have something like a stock ticker or something like that you can get and also put over here to the side. Oh, and here's my second page. I don't know why that took so long to show up, but there it is. And so I could do my weather here, and I'm going to make most of you really sad right now because I'm going to go into the configuration, and I'm going to choose to enter in my zip code here. Oops, I gotta change that. Enter in my zip code 85027, and then you gotta click search, and then after that it'll show you the location and OK. And now I'm seeing that here at 7:30 at night. It's 67 degrees here in balmy Arizona. Hopefully you don't live in Minnesota where it's 20 degrees below or something like that. But if I want to get more gadgets online, I simply click on this link down here, and it just takes you to a whole bunch of different ones. There's new ones being added all the time. I'm not going to exhaust all these, but you'll get the idea there. They're pretty cool. Now, the other thing I could do here is, maybe this is in the way. For example, right now it is in the way. What if I wanted to access my recycle bin? Well, I can't even click on it. It's just not able to do that right now. So what I could do here is, I could go to the Windows sidebar here, and I could right-click, and I could choose to exit this. Okay, so I'll just exit the sidebar, and I can also choose to start the sidebar again the next time Windows starts. That is the default behavior. Again, I just normally took mine off for usual purposes because it's in the way when I'm trying to train. Now I can access my recycle bin and do whatever I need to there. Now this next thing is a little bit difficult to describe because this is something that you don't normally see and that I cannot even actually show you because I don't have any existing problems. But this is the Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool, and I just put the letters up there because that's exactly what you would type from a command line or a start run or something like that. But it's just MSDT. And what happens here is you run this if you're experiencing a problem that you need Microsoft technical support for. And Microsoft Tech Support over the phone will give you a specific identifier for the problem that you're experiencing. It's a pass key that they'll give you. And this will then allow them to retrieve additional information from your computer to help identify your specific issues. And this requires administrator privileges. But once I've gotten that, I can just say which computer has the problem, this or a different computer. This might be the case if I have another computer that's not able to connect to the internet. But in this case, it's this computer, and then I would enter in the pass key, whatever Microsoft gives you here, and then you click on next, and that's pretty much it. At that point, some other prompts will appear depending upon the nature of the problem. It can vary depending on what you've got going on. But Microsoft does want you to know that they do have the Microsoft Support Diagnostic Tool that you can use in conjunction with Microsoft Tech Support. In this nugget, we took a look at supporting applications, which started off by looking at deploying applications themselves and the Windows installer technology. This is going to give us a number of different advantages over conventional setup.exe that we might have seen in the past because of the MSI file format, which allows it to interoperate with MSI exec. This allows us to run this installation for these various applications with scripts or by using something like a group policy object. And this is a very powerful way to deploy the applications. And then we took a look at some kind of desktop apps, quote unquote, things that you actually see on your desktop, such as the sidebar or the ability to change your monitor to a dual view configuration.